Hello everyone, how are your days going? I hope you are all doing great. My name is Restu Dinda N with my partners Satria, Letifa, Ahmad Musyaddad, and Nabilah Mahdiyyah on this occasion are going to present a material about poetry. Elements of poetry. First, voice, speaker, and tone. When we read or hear a poem, we hear a speaker's voice. It is the voice that conveys the poem's tone, and it is implied attitude towards its subject. Tone is an abstraction we make from the details of a poem's language, or the use of matter and rhyme, the inclusion of certain kinds of details and exclusion of other kinds, particular choices of words and sentence pattern, of imagery and figurative language. When we listen to a poem's language and hear the voice of its speaker, we catch its tone and feeling, ultimately its meaning. The second element of poetry is diction. As the most successful poems include the best words in the best order, as Samuel Taylor Coleridge has said. In reading any poem, it is necessary to know what the words mean, but it is equally important to understand what the words imply or suggest. So, because poetries often hint indirectly at more than their words directly state, it is necessary to develop their habit of considering the connotations of words as well as their denotations. Often for both poetries and readers, the best words are those that do the most works. They convey feelings and indirectly imply ideas rather than state them outright. Poetries choose a particular word because it suggests what they want to suggest. Its appropriateness is a function of both denotation and its connotation.
So, imagery is one of the literary devices that engages the human senses like sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Imagery can be written without using any figurative language at all. It represents object, action, and idea which appeal our senses. There are 5 main types of imagery, each related to one of the human senses. The first one is visual imagery that represents sight, and then auditory imagery represents hearing, olfactory imagery represents smell, gustatory imagery represents taste, and the last, tactile imagery represents touch. Then you can see that there are 2 examples of imagery in poetry. So the first imagery is Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. As we can see that here Romeo is comparing the beauty of Juliet. He says that she looks more radiant and brightly lit torch in the hall. Further, he says that her face glows like a precious bright jewel against the dark skin of an African in the night. Here, he uses the contrasting image of light and dark to portray her beauty. The imagery also involves the use of figurative language. He uses the simile to enhance the imagery. And then, the second imagery is After Apple Picking by Robert Frost. As we can see again, this line have powerful imagery. We can feel the swaying leather, see the bending boughs, and hear the rumbling sound of apples going in the cellar bin. These lines are literal. Every word means what it typically means. The entire poem is imagery that conveys deep feelings of contemplation and subtle remorse for things left undone for the reader.
The next elements of poetry would be figures of speech, simile, and metaphor. Poetry always deals with figurative language. Language can be conveniently classified as either literal or figurative. When we speak literally, we mean exactly what each word conveys. When we use figurative language, we mean something other than the actual meaning of the words. For example, take a look in the sentence, "Go jump in the lake." In literal meaning, this sentence would be intended as a command to leave and jump into a lake. However, this sentence uses literal language. In figurative language, telling someone to go jump in the lake means that we are telling them something. Figurative language is quite different with literal language, isn't it? Simile establishes the comparison explicitly with the words like or as. A metaphor, on the other hand, employs no such explicit verbal clue. The comparison is implied in such a way that the figurative term is substituted or identified with the literal one. For example, "My daughter dances like an angel" is a simile. "My daughter is an angel" is a metaphor. In this example, the difference involves more than the word like. The simile is more restricted in its comparative suggestion than the metaphor. That's why the daughter's angelic attributes are more extensive in the unspecified and unrestricted metaphor. In the simile, however, she only dances like an angel. There's no suggestion that she possesses other angelic qualities.
And then we are going to talk about open form. Writing in open form, a poet seeks to discover a fresh and individual arrangement for words in every poem. Such a poem, generally speaking, has neither a rhyme scheme nor a basic matter in forming the whole of it. Doing without those powerful, some would say hypnotic elements. The poet who writes in open form relies on other means to engage and to sustain the reader's attention. Novice poets often think that open form looks easy, not nearly so hard to us rhyming everything, but in truth, formally open forms are easy too. Write only if written carelessly. To compose lines with keen awareness of open form's demands and of its infinite possibilities calls for skills at least as much as that needed to write in meter and rhyme, if not more. If the poet succeeds, then the discovered arrangement will seem exactly right for what the poem is saying. Poetry in open form used to be called free verse, from the French vers libre, suggesting a kind of verse liberated from the cycles of rhyme and meter. For a successful poem in open form, the term free verse seems inaccurate, being an art form, said Carlos Williams. Verse cannot be free in the sense of having no limitation or guiding principle. Various substitute names have been suggested: organic poetry, compassion by field, raw poetry, open form poetry, and others. But what does it matter you call it? Remake the editors of 1969 anthology called Naked Poetry. The best poems of the last 30 years turn rhyme usually and turn move on feet of more or less equal duration usually. That non-description moves toward the only technical principle they all have in common.
Writing in closed form, a poet follows or finds some sort of patterns, such as that of a sonnet with its rhyme scheme and its 14 lines of iambic pentameter. On a page, poems in closed form tend to look regular and symmetrical, often falling into stanzas that indicate groups of rhymes. When writing a closed form poem, The poet follows specific rules to fit a model. Closed form gives some poems a valuable advantage. It makes them more easily memorable. The epic poems of nations, long narratives tracing the adventures of the popular heroes, the Greek Iliad and Odyssey, the French Song of Roland, the Spanish Cid, tend to occur in patterns of fairly consistent line length or number of stresses because these works are sometimes transmitted orally.